"Oh, you found work after all," Lauren Hayes said, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. "Let me guess. Janitor or security?" She smiled thinly at the man she had fired 6 months earlier. "Don't tell me you came all the way here just to watch other people sign contracts." Ryan Brooks walked past her without a word. Lauren took the silence as fear and told herself the firing had been right. 9 minutes later, the conference room doors opened. The man waiting in the chair at the head of the table waiting to sign with her was Ryan. Stonebridge Engineering occupied 16 floors of a gray tower on the east side of the city, and for 19 years, Ryan Brooks had come through the same lobby doors before 7 in the morning. He had started there as a field engineer, a decade in hard hats and job trailers, and he had never lost the habit of reading a drawing before he read a spreadsheet. At 42, he was chief operating officer, and he still kept a scale ruler in his desk drawer. People at Stonebridge described him in the same 3 words more or less: careful, quiet, right. Not right in the way that made him pleasant to argue with, right in the way that made arguing with him expensive. He had a way of asking one question in a meeting that turned a good idea into a bad one in front of everybody, and then apologizing for the interruption. Douglas Hayes had hired him. Douglas built Stonebridge out of a 2-man survey outfit in the 1980s and ran it for 34 years, on a rule he repeated so often it became a joke around the job trailers: the concrete does not care how confident you are. He promoted Ryan 4 times and never thanked him publicly because Ryan had asked him not to. There was a great deal Ryan had done that never had his name on it. In 2019, he spent 6 weeks rebuilding the bid on the Fairmont Transit contract because the numbers underneath it were fantasy, and when Stonebridge won it clean and delivered it on schedule, the press release named the business development team. In 2022, he killed a supplier agreement 3 days before signature after a night spent reading 12 years of the vendor's litigation history. That vendor collapsed the following spring. Nobody at Stonebridge connected the 2 events, and Ryan never explained. He believed the result was the record. If the building stood, if the contract closed, if nobody got hurt, then the argument had already won and did not need a witness. It was a philosophy that worked perfectly for 19 years, right up until the morning it did not. Douglas retired on a Friday in March, and on Monday his daughter took the chair. Lauren Hayes was 35 with an MBA and 6 years at a consulting firm in Chicago, and she understood one thing about Stonebridge with total clarity: every person in that building had known her father before they knew her. To half of them, she would always be an inheritance. She decided in her first week that the fastest way to stop being an inheritance was to be obeyed. She was not stupid. That was what made it worse. She read fast, she saw patterns, and inside 2 months, she cut a bloated procurement layer that Douglas had been too sentimental to touch. But she had learned management in rooms where the deliverable was a recommendation, and she had never in her life stood on a slab and watched a pour go wrong. She thought resistance was a personality problem. By her 7th month, 7 people had told her some version of the same sentence, that she was buying schedule with risk, that the number she wanted was not the number that existed. A structural lead put it in writing twice. A pre-construction director said it once in a hallway. None of them were fired. They simply found over the following weeks that their projects were reassigned, and their meetings got shorter, and one by one, they took calls from other cities and went. Lauren did not connect those departures to anything. She read them as a compensation problem. Ryan resisted differently. He sent memos. He asked his one question. By her 3rd month, Lauren had stopped reading past the first paragraph of anything he wrote, and she had started to notice how the room looked at him when he spoke, the particular stillness of people waiting for the real decision. She had the title. He had the room. She could not have named it that cleanly at the time, but she felt it every week. The project was called Meridian, a mixed-use development on the South Riverfront. $340 million, the largest thing Stonebridge had ever signed. It was hers. She had chased it, closed it, and put her name on it in front of the board. It was also by the 4th month 9% over budget and running 6 weeks behind, and every Monday she sat in a room where the numbers said so out loud. The proposal came from the cost consultants she had brought in from Chicago. Value engineering, they called it, a package of 18 changes that would pull $22 million back out of Meridian and put the project 2 weeks ahead of a schedule it had never actually been on. It was a good deck, clean charts. Ryan read it twice in one night. 6 of the 18 changes were fine. 9 were aggressive and defensible. 3 were not. The package resequenced the excavation shoring on the riverfront face, substituted a lighter temporary support system, and cut third-party inspection from continuous to periodic, and it did all 3 on the same elevation at the same time, on a site where the water table sat closer to the surface than anyone from Chicago seemed to have noticed. It also, in a footnote on page 41, quietly moved liability for the shoring design onto a subcontractor called Vantage Foundation Systems, a firm that did not have the insurance to carry it. Ryan wrote 4 pages and asked for time before the meeting. Lauren gave him 11 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, with her assistant standing in the doorway. He told her the 3 changes could not be made together on that face. He told her the footnote on page 41 was not a cost saving. It was a transfer of risk to a company that would be bankrupt the day that risk materialized, at which point the risk came straight home. He told her he was not asking her to abandon the package. He was asking her to pull 3 items out of it. Lauren asked whether the consultants were wrong. Ryan said the consultants were working from a soil report dated 2 years before the river work upstream changed the drainage on that bank. She asked whether he had proof the report was outdated. He said that was the entire point, nobody had checked, and the check cost $40,000 and 9 days. She looked at the 4 pages on her desk without picking them up and said the schedule did not have 9 days in it. What she heard was not an engineer. What she heard was the man the room went quiet for telling her that her project, the one with her name on it, needed his permission. She had been in the chair for 7 months. The board met in 3 weeks. She could not walk in with Meridian 9% over and a story about soil. The meeting was Thursday morning in the long room on the 9th floor. 9 people around the table and the Meridian package on the screen. Lauren ran it herself slide by slide, and at the end, she said the package needed the chief operating officer's signature to move and slid the sign-off sheet down the table. It was clean theater, and she had thought it through. In front of the leadership team, he would either sign or he would be visibly formally the obstacle. Ryan read the sheet he had already read. Then he set the pen down beside it. Not on it. He said without heat that he would sign 15 of the 18 items that morning, that he would not sign items 4, 9, and 12, and he gave the reason in 2 sentences that everyone in the room understood, and nobody wanted to be the first to agree with. There was a way out of that moment, and it was sitting right there. She could have taken 15. 15 was $17 million and a win. But 15 was also a negotiation in front of her own leadership team with a man who had just demonstrated a veto. She did not take 15. "This isn't a technical objection," Lauren said. "This is a pattern. You've been running a second chain of command in this company since the day I sat down, and everyone in this room knows it." Nobody answered her. "I'm not going to run a company where the chief operating officer decides which board-approved strategy he participates in." Ryan said the objection was on 3 items, and he put a number on it, $40,000 9 days, and said the rest of the package could move that afternoon. He did not say that he had been right before. He did not say that his signature was the only thing standing between the company and a hole in a riverbank. He was still at that moment expecting the work to speak for him. "Then you're not going to participate in it at all," Lauren said. "Your employment with Stonebridge is terminated effective immediately. I'd like you to leave the room." A chair moved somewhere. The general counsel Marcus Ellery said her name once quietly, and she did not look at him. The screen was still showing item 12. Ryan stood up. He thanked the room, which was the strangest part of it, and he walked out. It took him 22 minutes to clear his office because 19 years of a man who keeps a scale ruler in his drawer amounts to 1 box and a coat. He shook 3 hands in the hallway. He did not go back to the 9th floor. He did not call the board. He did not send the 4 pages to anyone. Marcus caught him at the elevator and said low that if Ryan wanted to fight this, he had a case, and Marcus would say so under oath. Ryan said he didn't want to fight it. He said Meridian would either stand up or it wouldn't, and a lawsuit would not change which. Marcus told him it was the most arrogant, humble thing he had ever heard in his life. The doors closed on it. In the lobby, Ryan handed his badge to a security guard he had known for 12 years, a man who clearly wanted to say something, and said nothing. Then he was on the sidewalk at 10:40 in the morning on a Thursday, holding a box, and what surprised him was how little he felt. He had been right. Being right had gotten him a box. He did not yet understand that this was information. The story reached the whole company by lunch, and it reached it in her version that the chief operating officer had refused a board-approved strategy and had been removed for it. It was not a lie. That was the useful thing about it. By Friday, 2 field superintendents had called Ryan's cell, and he had told both of them to stay and do their jobs. Within a week, the version had hardened into fact, and Ryan offered no competing one, because offering one would have meant asking people to choose, and the people who would have chosen him were the ones who could least afford to. He spent 9 days doing very little. He called no one. 2 recruiters called him and went to voicemail, because the honest answer to what had happened at Stonebridge was not a story he intended to tell in a hotel conference room. He read, he ran in the mornings, and every night at some point he thought about item 9, the shoring substitution, and whether they had pulled it out of the package after he left, and he assumed they hadn't. The call came on the 10th day from a woman who said she was calling from the office of Gerald Whitmore at Harrison Capital and asked whether Ryan could come downtown on Friday. Ryan knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. Harrison had spent 30 years buying companies that built things and were bad at money, and it had a reputation for being unsentimental and for being right. He said Friday was fine. He had nothing else on Friday. Whitmore was 71, and he did not open with a compliment. He opened with a folder. Inside it was a 2-year read of Stonebridge, the leverage, the burn, the meridian overrun the attrition curve on senior technical staff since March, and on the 9th page, a summary of the Fairmont bid rebuild from 2019, with Ryan's name attached to it, which had never appeared on a single document inside Stonebridge. Ryan looked at that page for a while. "Douglas told me," Whitmore said. 2 years ago over dinner, when I asked him what he actually owned, he said the answer wasn't a building. He closed the folder. "We're going to acquire Stonebridge, not because we like it, because it's going to be available at a price in about 6 months, and the underlying business, the people who pour the concrete, is sound. That company is not failing at construction. It's failing at judgment. Your former chief executive isn't incompetent," Whitmore added. "That's what makes her dangerous. An incompetent executive gets caught in 4 months. She's smart enough to make every bad decision survivable for exactly 1 more quarter." He tapped the folder once. "The company doesn't die from any one of these. It dies from all of them, on a Tuesday, about a year from now." Then he explained the structure, and it was not the offer Ryan had braced for. Harrison would capitalize a holding company built for one purpose, to buy Stonebridge's senior debt, then its equity. Harrison would put up every dollar and take a preferred return on those dollars. It would not take the votes. Voting control of the vehicle would sit with Ryan alongside an operating stake that grew as the asset's value grew, and an option to buy up over time out of what he earned. Ryan said that was a great deal of control for a man who was not bringing any money. "I'm 71, Whitmore said. "I have bought 30 of these. Everyone that failed, failed because the money held the votes, and the money doesn't know what a shoring plan is. I don't want to run a construction company. I want to own the return on one being run correctly." He looked at the folder again. "I'm not buying an asset. I'm buying your judgment. And judgment doesn't work if it has to ask permission. You'd know that better than most." So Ryan would not be purchasing a company with money he did not have. He would be earning into it with the only thing he had ever had, which was being right about buildings. Ryan sat with it. The clean answer was no. He had given that place 19 years and walked out with a box, and somewhere underneath the flatness, he had wanted very badly never to see that lobby again. Going back, buying it of all things, looked from the outside like exactly one thing, and he knew it. It looked like a man who could not take being fired. He asked Whitmore one question: what happens to Stonebridge if Harrison doesn't buy it? Whitmore said someone else would in about 14 months at a distress price, and that whoever it was would strip the equipment, sell the backlog, and put 2,400 people into a market that did not want them. He said it the way a man reads a weather report. 2,400 people. Ryan had hired maybe 600 of them. He knew what the field crews made, and he knew what happened to a 50-year-old superintendent in a bad market. He thought about Marcus at the elevator. He thought about the footnote on page 41. And he thought for the first time since Thursday that being right in a room where nobody could hear him was not a principle. It was a habit. He said yes on the condition that his name stayed off it, not for theater. Because the moment Lauren Hayes learned that the man she had fired was standing on the other side of an acquisition, she would spend 6 months fighting a person instead of a balance sheet, and she would burn the company down, proving a point. The deal only worked if she never saw it as personal, because it wasn't. Whitmore agreed faster than Ryan expected, which told him Whitmore had intended to require it anyway. The vehicle was incorporated in November under a name that meant nothing. The paperwork at Harrison listed Ryan as a senior operating advisor, one of 9, in a group with no public roster. He would not appear in a filing until the day the deal closed. That night, Ryan sat at his kitchen table and read the attrition curve again. 8 senior engineers gone in 7 months. He knew 6 of the names. He understood finally what he was going to be doing, and it was not revenge, and it was not rescue either. It was the 11 minutes he had asked for on a Tuesday taken this time instead of requested. 6 months later, he was standing in a lobby 38 floors beneath a conference room, and Lauren Hayes was walking toward him, and she was smiling. The lobby of Harrison Capital ran 5 stories of glass and pale stone, and Lauren Hayes crossed it at the head of 6 people who had spent the whole flight rehearsing her deck. She had not slept. In her folder was a term sheet for $180 million in growth capital, and she had told her own board that this morning ended 3 conversations at once. The Meridian overrun the liquidity squeeze, and the quiet, 13-month-old question of whether Douglas Hayes's daughter could actually run Douglas Hayes's company. The last 6 months had been the hardest of her life, and she had survived them the way she survived everything, by moving faster than the problem. Meridian had come in 16% over and 4 months late, and every dollar of it had come out of that riverfront face. She had never gotten items 4, 9, and 12 into the contract. The owner's agreement required a licensed certification on any change to the temporary works design, and the only person at Stonebridge who held that standing had walked out of the building with a box, and it took the company 90 days to hire a replacement, and by then, the excavation was already open under the original design. Resequencing a live excavation cost more than the change was worth. She had missed her own window by a signature, so the face went in the slow way, the expensive way. Continuous inspection, the heavier support system, the original sequence, and when the dewatering came in over, somebody finally ran the $40,000 soil check, and the report said the water table had risen since the river work upstream. She read that memo alone in her office and told herself what she needed to hear, that the overrun was a design problem, that the design was his, that a more courageous engineer would have found $11 million of margin in that riverbank. She had told herself it was soil. Soil was nobody's fault. She saw him near the security desk, and her stomach did something before her mind caught up. He was in a plain dark suit with no bag, standing to one side, the way people stand when they are waiting to be let through, and for 1 full second, Lauren felt the pure animal relief of a person who has been proven right by the universe. 6 months, and the man who had lectured her about liability was standing in another company's lobby, waiting on somebody else's clearance. She stopped walking, which meant all 6 people behind her stopped walking. "Ryan," she said, warm as a knife. "You found work after all. Let me guess. Janitor or security?" One of her vice presidents looked at the floor. "Don't tell me you came all this way just to watch other people sign contracts." Ryan looked at her the way a man looks at weather. He did not answer. That silence should have warned her. Instead, it fed her, because she had spent 13 months in rooms that went quiet for him, and this was the first time the quiet was hers. "You know what I've realized," she said. "You were never actually difficult. You were just a man who couldn't stand not being the one in charge. That's all it ever was. And you still work for somebody, Ryan. You always will." The lobby carried it. A woman at the security desk stopped typing. "Firing you was the right call," Lauren said, and she meant it as a conclusion the way you close a file. "I'd make it again this morning." Ryan stepped around her without hurry and walked toward the elevator bank, and the guard at the turnstile did not stop him, and Lauren did not notice that because she was busy reading his back as fear. He was avoiding her. Of course he was. What was he going to say that he'd been right? Nobody in this building knew who he was. Her chief financial officer, Alan Pierce, caught up beside her and said quietly that maybe that hadn't been the room for it. Lauren told him it had been exactly the room for it, and that people needed to see that she had not lost 13 months to a man with a scale ruler. She was still saying it when the receptionist called the Stonebridge party for the 38th floor. The elevator took 90 seconds. Lauren used them to fix her collar in the polished doors and run the first line of her presentation, which began with the word momentum. Behind her, nobody spoke. Alan checked his phone twice and put it away without reading it. The doors opened onto a corridor of gray light, and a young man led them down it to a room with a table long enough to seat 20 and a window that showed the whole river, including 30 blocks south, the raw gray shape of Meridian. 14 people were already seated. Lauren registered the number and felt the first cold thread of wrongness. $180 million did not require 14 people. Then every person in the room stood up. Lauren began to say good morning. She got as far as the second word because they were not standing for her. They had turned all of them toward the far end of the table, where Ryan Brooks had walked in through a service door with a folder under his arm and taken the chair at the head, the chair facing the window, the chair her deck had been built to persuade. Gerald Whitmore did not stand. He was 71, and he had the seat at Ryan's right, and he let the room settle for exactly as long as it needed. "Miss Hayes," he said, "take a seat. I think introductions are overdue, which is partly our fault." Lauren did not sit. Alan sat. The other four sat one at a time the way people do when the ground has moved and they are pretending it hasn't. "You came here this morning to discuss a strategic investment," Whitmore said. "That term sheet is void. It was drafted in February, and February is a long time ago." He slid a single sheet down the table, and Lauren's hand stopped it flat because her fingers would not close. At 6 o'clock this morning, an entity called Kestrel Holdings completed the acquisition of a controlling interest in Stonebridge Engineering. Kestrel bought your senior debt from the syndicate in December. It bought your father's holding in February. Everything since then has been paperwork. The filing goes public at noon. "My father's holding," Lauren said. Douglas signed. She did not ask him to repeat it. She heard her own voice from somewhere outside herself ask when the board had been told, and Whitmore said the board had been told at 7, which was 1 hour before her flight landed, and that the chairman had asked that she be told here in person rather than on a runway. "Then this is a courtesy meeting," Lauren said. "No," Whitmore said. "This is your operating review. Harrison Capital funded Kestrel. Every dollar of it. What we do not hold is the votes." He turned his hand toward the head of the table without any ceremony at all, which was somehow the worst part. Ryan Brooks is Kestrel's controlling holder. As of 6 o'clock, he is the owner of Stonebridge Engineering. He structured the acquisition. He has for 6 months. The room went on existing. That was the thing Lauren could not get over afterward, that nothing broke. Nobody gasped. The light on the river did not change. 14 people looked at her with the mild, patient attention of professionals waiting for an agenda item. And 30 seconds ago downstairs, she had asked this man in front of her entire leadership team whether he had found work as a janitor. Her hearing went strange. She could see Alan's mouth moving somewhere on her left. She thought with perfect clarity he let me finish. He had stood in that lobby and let her get all the way to the end. And then he had walked to the elevator, and he had not needed to say a single word because he had known she would be in this room in 9 minutes. Ryan opened his folder. "Sit down, Lauren," he said. It was not cruel. It was worse than cruel. It was the voice of a man beginning a meeting. "We have a lot to get through." She sat. What he did then, he did without raising his voice once, and it took 4 hours. He said that as of that morning he was commissioning a full operational audit of Stonebridge, covering her entire tenure, every project, every change order, every signature back to the March. She took the chair, and that Harrison's team would be inside the building on Monday, with the General Counsel Marcus Ellery coordinating access. He said Lauren remained Chief Executive Officer during the audit, and that he expected her cooperation. Then he asked his one question about Meridian, and it was the same question he had asked in 11 minutes on a Tuesday, 13 months and $11 million ago. The audit ran 4 weeks, and it did not find fraud, which Lauren clung to for the first 2 weeks, and understood by the 4th was not a defense. It found something more expensive than fraud. It found a company that had learned to stop talking. The pattern was legible on a single page. Every project touched by a decision she had made personally ran between 9 and 22% over. Every project she had left alone came in within 4%. Meridian was the largest number, but the auditors flagged something worse. The Carrollton Depot, the 9th Street Garage, 2 others, all of them re-scoped in the same 8 weeks after Meridian's overrun hit the board. All of them re-scoped to move cost out of the current quarter and into the next fiscal year. Nothing illegal. It just meant the company had been eating itself to make Mondays survivable exactly the way Whitmore had described it in a folder 6 months earlier. The people file was thinner and hit harder. 17 senior technical staff had left in 14 months, 8 before the firing, 9 in the 90 days after it. Harrison's team called every one of them, and 15 took the call, and the exit interviews Stonebridge had on record said compensation and relocation, and the phone calls said something else. A structural lead named Dana Reyes, who had gone to a competitor in Denver, said she had raised the water table issue in writing twice and been told by the chief executive that she was solving a problem that was not on the schedule. She still had the emails, and there were the safety notes. Not a catastrophe, that was what made it unbearable to read. 14 field reports across 4 projects, flagging things that were fixed eventually on somebody's own initiative, at somebody's own cost, quietly by superintendents who had stopped sending them up the chain, because sending them up the chain had become a career decision. The auditors put it in one line in the summary escalation, has been reclassified by staff as insubordination. Ryan read that line 3 times in his kitchen at 1 in the morning and did not feel vindicated. He felt sick. He had spent 19 years believing the result was the record, that if the building stood, the argument had won. Here was the arithmetic of that belief. 14 reports, 17 people, a company where being right had become something you did privately on your own time at your own risk. He had helped build that. He had modeled it, floor by floor, every time he swallowed his own name to keep the peace. Lauren fought it the entire 4 weeks, and she fought it well, which was the tragedy. She sat across from the auditors and explained that Meridian's overrun was an inherited design and a rising water table nobody had forecast. She explained that the attrition was a compensation gap. She explained that the rescoping was a Treasury decision made with the Chief Financial Officer's full participation, and Alan Pierce, sitting 6 feet away, said nothing at all, and that silence told Lauren more about her 14 months than any document did. Everything she said was partly true. That was her whole method. Every answer moved 1 degree away from the sentence underneath all of it, which was that 8 people had told her the same thing, and she had removed the 8th one in front of her entire leadership team in a room on a Thursday morning. And after that, nobody had told her anything. Near the end of the 4th week, Marcus Ellery brought Ryan the last piece, and he put it on the table without a word. It was a claim notice against a builder called Alderfield Constructors on a project 2 states away called Ridgeline, an excavation on a riverbank, shored by Vantage Foundation Systems, the subcontractor from the footnote on page 41. Vantage had taken the same value engineering package to Alderfield in the spring and sold it as a proven concept. The lighter support system, the resequenced excavation, periodic inspection instead of continuous. In January, the face let go at 4 in the morning, which was the only mercy in the file because at 4 in the morning there was nobody in the hole. 2 adjacent parcels were undermined. Vantage filed for bankruptcy in 9 days, and its insurance was found to be worth almost nothing, and the entire exposure, the collapse, the owner's consequential damages, both parcels came home to the company that had signed. $310 million. None of it had been filed against Stonebridge. It could not be. Items 4, 9, and 12 had never gone into the Meridian contract because the sign-off sheet had never been signed, because the man who wouldn't sign it had been walked out of the building instead, and the riverfront face on Meridian had been built the expensive way, the slow way, and it was standing. The board met on the 15th floor on a Thursday, 14 months and 1 week after Lauren Hayes had taken the chair, and Ryan presented for 20 minutes. He did not editorialize. He put the audit summary on the screen, then the exit calls, then the 14 field reports, and then he put up the Meridian sign-off sheet from that Thursday morning, the one with 15 items initialed and 3 left blank beside the Alderfield claim notice, and he let the room do its own math. "I want to be precise," Ryan said, "because precision is the whole point. I didn't save this company. The contract saved it, and the contract held because 3 items never went in, and those 3 items never went in because of a piece of paper that was never signed." He looked down the table. "That's not a story about me being right. Anybody in the field could have told you the same thing, and several of them did in writing, and you have their emails. It's a story about what this company does with people who say it." Lauren spoke for 9 minutes. She was good. She was always good. And she talked about growth and market conditions and a turnaround plan that needed 2 more quarters. And at some point in the middle of it, she heard herself from a distance saying the same 3 sentences she had been saying for 4 weeks, and she understood that every person at that table had already heard them, and that she had built a room in which nobody would ever interrupt her to say so. The chairman called it. Ryan abstained, which surprised her, and which the minutes recorded, and which she would think about for a long time afterward. It did not matter. The vote to remove Lauren Hayes as Chief Executive Officer of Stonebridge Engineering was unanimous among those voting, and it took under 2 minutes, and 2 of the hands that went up belonged to men her father had appointed, and who had known her since she was in graduate school. She sat very still. 14 months, 1 lobby, 90 seconds in an elevator. She had come into that building believing her only real problem was a man who would not obey her, and she was leaving it, having learned that he had been the last person willing to tell her the truth to her face, and that she had removed him for it in front of everyone, and that everyone had been watching, and that everyone had drawn the correct conclusion. Not one of them had been wrong about her. That was what finally landed sitting in a chair that was no longer hers. It was not the vote, and it was not the audit, and it was not even the $310 million. It was that for 14 months she had been surrounded by people who could see it coming, and she had spent every one of those months making certain that not a single one of them would open their mouth. She waited 11 days before she came to see him. In that time, she did not call a lawyer, which surprised her more than it surprised anyone else. She had 1, she had 3, and any of them would have told her there was something in a 14-month tenure and a controlling shareholder who had once been her employee. She never made the call. She sat in an apartment she was going to have to sell and read the audit summary the way other people read a diagnosis, and by the 9th day, she had stopped looking for the sentence that was wrong. Ryan took the meeting on a Tuesday afternoon on the 9th floor in the long room where the Meridian package had gone up on the screen. It was his choice, and it was not theater. It was the only room in the building where the conversation could be honest, and he suspected she would understand that. And she did, the moment she walked in and saw where he had put the chairs beside each other on the same side of the table, not across it. Lauren stood for a moment before she sat. "I rehearsed this," she said. 3 versions. They're all garbage." She set her bag down. "So I'm going to say the true one, and it's going to sound worse." Ryan said nothing, which was not a tactic. He had nothing prepared either. "For 6 months, she said, I thought you were a failed employee. Not a rival. Not a threat. A failure. I built a whole explanation of you, and it was very tidy, a man in his 40s who couldn't stand taking orders, who'd peaked, who'd never get another chair like the one he had. Every time Meridian slipped, I told myself the design was too cautious, and the design was yours, and at least I didn't have you in the room making it slower." Her hands were flat on the table. "In the lobby, I wasn't being cruel. That's the part I can't get past. I was being accurate. I looked at you standing by that security desk, and I genuinely believed I was looking at the end of you." "I know," Ryan said. "That's why you let me finish." "I let you finish because there was nothing I could have said in that lobby that the room upstairs wasn't going to say better in 9 minutes." He turned his hand over. "And because if I'd told you there, you'd have spent the next 4 hours defending yourself instead of listening. You had $180 million in that folder and no company to spend it on. I needed you to hear the audit, not the ambush." Lauren took that. She had come in expecting to be gloated at and had prepared for it, and had discovered the way she had been discovering things for 11 days, that she had prepared for the wrong man entirely. "You were never trying to win the lobby," she said. "There's nothing in the lobby to win." She was quiet for a while, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost its edge, and what was underneath it was not humility yet, but it was the raw material. "Do you know what I thought a chief executive was? Somebody who is right publicly in front of people who doubt her. That was the whole job as I understood it. 14 months and every meeting was an audition, and every disagreement was somebody voting on whether Douglas Hayes' daughter should be in the building." She looked at the screen at the end of the room, which was blank now. "So I stopped taking disagreement as information. It was all just voting." "And then you fired the 8th person," Ryan said, "in front of the leadership team." She said it evenly, which cost her something. "That's what I actually did that morning. I didn't remove a chief operating officer. I taught 9 people what happens when you say the thing out loud, and they taught the floor below them. And by August, there were superintendents fixing things with their own money rather than send a report up." Her mouth moved without a smile. The auditors used the word reclassified. Escalation was reclassified as insubordination. I've read that line maybe 200 times. Ryan let the silence hold. Then he said the thing he had been carrying since 1 in the morning in his kitchen. "You should know that I made that easy for you." She looked at him. 19 years I ran a second chain of command in this company," he said. "You called it that in the meeting, and you weren't wrong. You were just wrong about why it was dangerous. I rebuilt the Fairmont bid in 2019 and let the business development team take the release. I killed a supplier in 2022 and told no one why. I believed the result was the record. If the building stood, the argument had already won." He tapped the table once. "What that actually taught this company was that being right is something you do privately, on your own time, without your name on it. So when you started punishing people for saying it out loud, they already had 19 years of practice being quiet. I didn't fight you in that room, Lauren. I thanked the room and I went home. That's not integrity. That's a habit that looks like integrity." Lauren had come in with a confession and had not expected to receive one. "You didn't have to tell me that. You're the only person in the building it would mean anything to," she asked then, and it took her a full minute to build the sentence whether there was any version of this where she stayed. She did not ask for the chair. She had spent 11 days understanding that she was not going to ask for the chair, and she said so first, and then she said the rest of it, that she had never actually learned the job, that she had learned an imitation of the job from 6 years in rooms where the deliverable was a recommendation, and nobody ever had to stand on a slab and watch a pour go wrong, and that if he put her out on the street, she would go somewhere else and be exactly this person again with a new set of people, and that she did not want to be this person again. Ryan did not answer for a long time, and the reason was not calculation. He was thinking about 2,400 people and a folder in Gerald Whitmore's office and the words, "She's smart enough to make every bad decision survivable for exactly 1 more quarter." He was thinking that keeping her was defensible only if it was not a punishment, and that he could not fully swear it wasn't. "I'm not restoring you," he said. "Not now, not in 2 quarters. That's closed." "I know. There's an operations manager role on the Carrollton Depot rebuild. It reports to a project director who reports to a vice president who reports to whoever we hire into your old chair, 3 levels down from where you sat 11 days ago." He said it plainly, without softening it, because softening it would have been the cruelty. "You'd be managing schedule and cost on 1 project, and you would not have signature authority on a single change order. The superintendent out there has 22 years in the field, and he'd have the standing to overrule you on a Tuesday and tell you why on Wednesday." Lauren asked why he was offering it at all, And Ryan gave her the honest answer, which was that he wasn't sure, and that he had spent 3 days trying to decide whether he was being generous or just arranging a very slow humiliation with a professional justification stapled to it. He told her he had landed on a test instead of a verdict. If she took it and lasted, it meant something. If she took it and quit in 6 weeks, that meant something too, and he would not chase her. And if I'm good at it, she said, then in 3 years, somebody who isn't me will promote you and I won't be consulted. She took it. She did not thank him, which he respected more than he expected to. What Ryan built over the following months, he did not describe as a turnaround, because the company did not need turning. It needed permission. The engineering was sound. 2,400 people knew how to build things. What had broken was the sentence between the person who saw the problem and the person who could fix it, and every change he made was aimed at that one sentence and nothing else. He started by hiring back. Harrison's team had called 17 former senior staff during the audit, and Ryan called 10 of them himself, and he did not pitch. He told each one what the audit had found, including the line about reclassification, and told them what he had said to Lauren about his own 19 years. And then he asked. 7 came back. Dana Reyes came back from Denver as director of engineering, the structural lead who had raised the water table twice in writing, and been told she was solving a problem that wasn't on the schedule, and her first condition was that her original 2 emails be kept in the company's onboarding materials uncensored with the response attached. Ryan agreed in about 4 seconds. He put the audit summary on the internal network. All of it. Not a memo about the audit with the overrun table and the exit calls and the 14 field reports available to every employee at every level. And he did not hold a town hall about it, because a town hall would have made it an event, and he needed it to be a fact. Marcus Ellery told him it was legally insane. Ryan said the alternative was a company where 2,400 people knew the truth and pretended not to, and asked Marcus which of those was actually the liability. The mechanism itself was almost boring, which was the point. Any employee could file a technical objection on any project. It went to a 3-person panel, 1 engineer from outside the project, 1 from the field, 1 from legal, and it stopped the relevant work until the panel closed it, and it was closed in writing with a name on it. Not a suggestion box, a brake pedal, and a record of who took their foot off it. Ryan filed the first one himself on a project he had personally approved, and the panel found against him, and that document went on the network too. He made one rule for himself and never explained it to anyone. Every time he was right about something in a meeting, he said whose analysis it came from out loud by name, even when the honest answer was that it came from him, especially then. 19 years of anonymous correctness had built a floor of silence, and the only way he knew to unbuild it was to stand under the light he had spent 2 decades stepping out of. The numbers followed the way numbers do when a company stops eating itself. The rescoped projects were pulled back into their correct fiscal years, which made 1 quarter look terrible, and every quarter after it real. Meridian topped out in the spring, and the riverfront face did not move a millimeter, and the survey report on it ran 2 pages and said nothing at all. Which is what a survey report says when a thing has been built correctly. Attrition among senior technical staff went from 17 in 14 months to 2 in the following year, and both of those left for other cities. Within a few months, Stonebridge was booking work faster than any builder in the region and turning down about 1/3 of it, which Ryan considered the more meaningful number. Lauren went to Carrollton and did not quit. The first 10 weeks were, by her own account years later, the worst professional experience of her life, and it had nothing to do with the title. It was that people were careful around her, and she understood exactly why, and there was no memo she could write to fix it. The superintendent overruled her twice in the first month. The second time, she asked him to explain it to her on the slab, and stood there in the cold for 40 minutes, while he showed her what a pour looks like when the sequencing is wrong, and she asked a dozen questions and did not offer a single opinion, and something in the crew shifted about a week after that. She filed her first technical objection in the fall against a change order that a vice president wanted and that she believed was moving cost out of a quarter. The panel found in her favor. She did not celebrate it, and she never mentioned it to Ryan, and Ryan read it on the network the same night everyone else did. The last of it was not a scene, because there wasn't one. There was a Thursday in the long room on the 9th floor, 9 people around the table, the same table, where a sign-off sheet had once slid down toward a man who set the pen beside it, instead of on it. A project review, nothing special. Dana Reyes disagreed with the director of pre-construction and made him prove it. A field engineer 4 years out of school interrupted a vice president and was not interrupted back. Somebody said a number was wrong, and somebody else said, "Show me," and the room spent 9 minutes on it and moved on. Ryan stood at the window and did not speak for the whole 9 minutes, and he noticed with something that was not pride that no one had looked at him to see whether it was allowed. 30 blocks south, Meridian caught the afternoon light finished standing on a face that had cost $11 million more than anyone wanted to spend and had held. He had come back here believing the chair was the answer, that the only thing wrong with 19 years of being right in private was that nobody had made him the boss. He had been wrong about that too. The chair had bought him one thing, and one thing only, which was the ability to give the room away. And the room was the whole company. A man with a title could stop a bad decision. A room like this one stopped 100 he would never hear about. He thought about Lauren 40 minutes on a cold slab, asking questions and offering no opinions. He thought about Dana Reyes, who had emailed the truth twice and been told it wasn't on the schedule, sitting now at the head of the table with those emails posted where every new hire could read them. He thought about a hole in a riverbank 2 states away that had opened at 4 in the morning, and about the $310 million that had landed on a company that signed, and about how none of it had been courage. It had been a pen set down beside a sheet of paper instead of on it, in a room where somebody was still willing to say the thing out loud. The meeting ran long. Nobody asked his permission for that either. Ryan Brooks stood at the glass with his hands in his pockets and listened to 9 people argue with each other out loud with their names on it, and did not say a word.